Thank you for joining us at Christ Community Church. Our hope is that these messages challenge your soul, equip your spirit, and inspire your future. For more info about our church, visit us at christcommunity.com. And now, here is Pastor Vince Farrell.
Well, God bless you. Good morning. Hey, it's so good to have you here. I want to say welcome to all those listening online. Can we give our online listeners a hand clap this morning? Well, if you missed the announcement, this is Family Sunday. Every month that has a fifth Sunday, we as a church, our children's ministry teenager focus is what we call Think Orange. Now what that means is we believe two things. We believe, number one, that the color red is so important. Red represents family. It represents the heartbeat of God. We see in Genesis where God created a family first. And so we believe that the best ministry that can happen is in the family, red. We also believe that God created the church, you and I. Yellow represents light. We are commissioned by God to be the light of the world. We believe great ministry can happen when red and yellow work together. That's what we call Think Orange. And so what we have purposefully done is every Sunday that has a fifth, or month that has a fifth Sunday, we come together as a family. Now, I know for those of you that have small children, this might be kind of hard and difficult because they want to get up and run around. They want to do their thing. We have provided at the Kids Welcome Center some notes where they can follow along and take notes this morning. Now, this morning, if you are taking notes, and I hope you are, I'm titling this message, One Word. Say that with me. Now the rest of you. Now everyone together. There it is. All right. Yeah, one word. Now, in order for us to understand this one word, I first need to explain the what and why behind this one word, because it guides us as a church and should guide us as a family. This one word has built upon it one belief. We as a church believe this, that the belief that God created every child in His image. Now that's nothing earth-shattering, but we've seldom put that in practice, because if you will believe like we believe with your own kids, that they are created in the image of God, then it can change how you see every kid. The one belief also has accompanied with it one rule. And here's the rule. The rule comes from Matthew, where Jesus said, with everything that's in you, in your heart, soul, mind, and strength, love God first. We call it the Great Commandment. If we will adopt this one rule to be our primary focus in how we raise children and raise teens, then it can change the way you teach them. Now, as a parent myself who has two small ones, we're trying to teach them a lot of things. And of course, in Adventure Kids, we spend a lot of time teaching them the virtues of God. But if we can hone it all down, we spend a whole lot of time wrestling with how we can teach this one rule most effective. Because we believe that if we can teach children and teens and adults this one rule, it will change their view of how they interact with God. And that will change how they view themselves and view others. It's what Jesus said. Love God first and love your neighbor like yourself. And many times we wrestle with loving others because we don't truly love ourselves. We're mad, we're disappointed, we feel we've let people down, and we carry that weight and burden, and therefore it causes a hindrance for us to interact with God. If we can teach this one rule, it will change how you reach kids. Which brings me to the one word. I'm going to give you this morning one word that is our emphasis on how we teach children. Now, before I go in and dive into this one word, I want to take a moment this morning and introduce to you a young lady who I had the privilege of hearing. I guess it was at the youth conference at Troy Gent's church. He did a youth rally, and we took several teens, and I'm sitting there watching this young lady give her testimony, and my faith just blew up on the inside. I don't know about you, but I want to hang around people that have big faith. Amen? So I want you to please give a very welcoming Christ Community Church welcome to Colie Huddleston, if you would.
Don't know how it is you looked at me and saw the person that I could be, awakening my heart, breaking through the dark, suddenly your grace, like sunlight burning at midnight, making my life something so beautiful, beautiful, mercy reaching to save me, all that I need, you are so beautiful, beautiful. Now there's a joy inside I can't contain, but even perfect days can end in rain. I know it's pouring down, I see you through the clouds, shining on my face, like sunlight burning at midnight, making my life something so beautiful, beautiful, mercy reaching to save me, all that I need, you are so beautiful, beautiful. I am come undone, but I have just begun, changing by your like sunlight burning at midnight, making my life something so beautiful, beautiful, mercy reaching to save me, all that I need, you are so beautiful, like sunlight burning at midnight, making my life something so beautiful, beautiful, mercy reaching to save me, all that I need, you are so beautiful, beautiful.
My name is Colie Huddleston. I'm the girl y'all saw in the video. And I was saved on March 4th, 2007, and that was about 8 years ago. And on that day, my parents told me, you know, my life is no longer my own. And I was to follow God's will because I'm Christ's servant. Better? Okay. Because I'm Christ's servant. And that was always easy for me. And just like all Christians, we're called to witness. And in middle school, I felt the need to witness to a bunch of my friends, so I started inviting them to church. And at first, only like 5 kids came. So my mom and me had to drive separate from my dad, but then a bunch of people wanted to come, and a bunch of my friends wanted to come. And we had to find something else that we could take all these kids to church in. So we have an old church van. And this old church van is really, really blue. And it's really old, it's It's really rusty and it squeaks. And my mom drives a white Pontiac. So this old blue van was not like her fashion statement. She didn't like driving this really old thing. But we drove it to and from church every Wednesday night faithfully because we knew that that was God's will and we loved doing it, and I loved seeing my friends come to church. That made me happy, and I knew that's what God wanted. And then as I got older, I realized that a lot of little kids loved me, and I loved little kids. And God started opening doors for me to work in children's church ministry at my church. The children's church leader asked me if I wanted to shadow underneath her and help her. And I did that for a while, and then she trusted me with a small class of kids on Wednesday nights, and I taught that faithfully on Wednesday nights and Sundays, and I devoted my life to kids at that time. And you see, my will and God's will was hand in hand. It was working out perfect. My life was great because I was following God's will, and it was still my will because I loved doing that. But on April 26th, my will and God's will took two totally different directions. On that day, me and my brother were riding home with a family friend because my mom was away in Florida with my cousin on her senior trip. And to get from school to our house, there's a shortcut. It's really curvy and windy, and it's kind of unsafe if you don't drive it right. And on that day, we decided to take it. And I remember the conversation I was having with everyone in the van. I was telling them, oh, I'm scared about starting high school because I don't want to get shoved in a locker and then be stuck there all day. And then I said, I don't want to be late to class because then I'll get a detention, and I've only had one detention and I cried the whole time. I can't handle detention. And I was so scared. And in this middle of this conversation about being scared of high school, little did we know, there was two young men out jumping hills, going 80 miles an hour, flying around these curves, and as we topped this blind hill, they hit us head on, going 80 miles per hour. I was not wearing my seatbelt, and I guarantee you I probably wouldn't have all these injuries if I was wearing my seatbelt, but I wasn't. So they think what happened was I was catapulted from my seat, and I broke the side window of the van with my face. And it ripped the left side of my face, and then I came back out, and it ripped the right side of my face. And as I fell onto the floorboard, I must have busted some stuff up with my chin. But all I remember is I woke up, and everything was blurry. And I saw glass everywhere and blood. And I jumped out, and with all that glass and blood, I knew that someone had to be bleeding really bad, and someone must have been hurt. But I looked around at the other boys in the van, and none of them were hurt. Then I looked, and the driver was pinned in on the driver's seat. So I knew that it couldn't be her. And about that time, I looked down at my feet, and they were red. And they were covered. And then I looked at my pants, and my pants were sopping wet with blood. They're my favorite pants, too, so those pants are gone. And then I looked up, and my shirt was covered in blood. And then when I looked at my chest, it was sopping wet. And that's when I lifted up my hands, and I saw all that blood, and I thought, oh my gosh, no, God, this cannot be me. And I lifted up my hands, and I touched my face, and I still remember that feeling. Parts of my face weren't where they used to be anymore. And that's when I ran over and I looked into one of the windows of the van. And at the time, all I saw was this distorted silhouette of a face. And I thought that it was just because the windows were tinted that I could only see that. But now I know that my face was covered in so much blood, even my contacts were red, that was probably my face. The windows were not tinted. My face was black with really red blood all over it. And as I was seeing my face, I freaked out, and about that time, the first responders came to the scene, and there were two cops. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, they're here, they're gonna take care of me, they're gonna tell me I'm not gonna die, everything's gonna be fine. And I asked them, I said, please help me, and I remember I came running at them, and I'll never forget it. They looked at me, and they raised up their hands, and they said, I'm sorry, ma'am, but we cannot touch you. And I didn't know why they said that. At the time, I thought it was because maybe I just looked so bad that they didn't want to get anywhere near me, And then I thought maybe it's because they know I'm going to die and they see no point in helping me when there's other people who are going to live. This one's going to die. We don't need to help her. And as I was thinking this, I went over and I sat down on the side of the road and put my elbows on my knees and my forehead on my hands, and I just watched my blood form this puddle on the floor. And I just thought, just a second ago, I was complaining and so scared about starting high school and being shoved in a locker. And now I'm wondering if I'm ever going to live to see tomorrow. I started praying for someone who would not be afraid to touch me. I wanted someone to tell me, you are not going to die. You're going to be okay. And you know what? God answered my prayer almost immediately. God sent a man. His name was Byron Sparkman. Y'all saw me on the stretcher laying on the side of the road with the cop beside me. This cop was not on duty that day. He was actually going to play a game of golf with his friend when the call came across the radio that there had been a car accident. And he just felt the need that he had to go. He had to go. So when he got there, he asked, what can I do to help? Tell me, I'll do anything. And they said, see the girl right there? And at the time I was turned around, not facing him. And he said, go put her on a stretcher or one of that emergency boards. So he came over there and he said when I turned around, he thought I was fine. And I turned around and I was like sopping wet with blood. And I feel bad for him now. I probably freaked him out. But I know God sent him for me. He strapped me to that board. He really didn't know how to strap me to the board. We spent about 10 minutes trying to figure the thing out. And then as I laid there, bugs were trying to fly on my face and I guess eat all my blood on my face. And he swatted them away, and I laid there, and he took his hat off, and he shielded the sun from getting in my eyes. And I'll never forget, he rubbed my arm. I love my arm being rubbed. And he rubbed my arm for like 30 minutes. And I remember finally I worked up enough courage, and I looked at him, and I said, am I going to die? And he laughed. And I was like, well, this is awkward. Why are you laughing right now? This is a serious question. And he was like, oh, you're not going to die. It's just a couple scratches on your face. And I thought, really, please, I'm not 3. I know this is a lot worse. But it felt good to have someone make light of the situation I was in. And after that, I became comfortable with the situation I was in to some degree. And he stayed with me all the way up until they loaded me in the ambulance and they transferred me to Western Baptist Hospital. And immediately when I got there, I knew that I had freaked everybody in that hospital out. Everyone was so scared and looking at me. And the most vivid thing I remember when I got to the hospital was that they removed every shiny object from my room. And at the time, I didn't know why. And then I asked, later on, they were not doing surgeries on me. They could barely wash my face because I would flinch and they would freak out and run out of the room. And I asked them, I said, well, can I use the restroom, please? And the woman looked at me like, really? You're going to ask that right now? And then she walked out of the room, and she came back carrying this pan. And my legs were fine. I could have gotten up and used the actual restroom, but the woman brought me a bedpan. So I embarrassingly used this bedpan in front of this woman that I didn't know. And I remember thinking, they have removed every shiny object that I could see my reflection in from my room, had me use a bedpan, and won't even let me out of my bed because of the mirrors on the ceiling. My face has to look awful. And I was laying on that bed wondering, what did I do, God? What did I do to deserve this? I'm 13 and my face is ripped apart. I felt emotionless. I wasn't sad. I wasn't mad. I wasn't happy. I just felt so dead inside. I felt dead. And all I wanted was it for just to be this bad dream, and that in a second I could pinch my arm and I would wake up and I would be fine. But that didn't happen. I'll be honest, I was not trying to start a revival in Western Baptist Hospital. That was not first on my list. And then finally, around 12 o'clock that night, I was transferred to Vanderbilt Hospital. And when I got there, they immediately started working on my face. I was in a 3.5-hour-long surgery where the nurses stopped counting stitches at 70, and they still were nowhere near done. The most I remember from the surgery is I remember waking up and turning around, and I saw that my pillow was like covered in blood, and I remember just passing back out again from all the medicine and seeing all that blood. And when I woke up around that morning, I remember thinking, I will see my face. I am done with these people trying to hide it from me. Up until this point, I could walk by a window, I could walk by a picture frame, and I could look at my face, check my hair, and no one was affected. But now everyone is hiding my own reflection from myself. That hurt. I wanted to see it. That was my face. And finally, I was like, can I please have a mirror? I want to see my face. And the doctor was like, okay, here you go. Just be prepared. It's not as bad as you think it's going to be. And I remember raising that mirror up to my face. And when I looked into that mirror, I hated what I saw. I hated it a lot. It was a lot worse than what I thought it was going to be. And immediately when I looked into it, I thought, there goes my first date. There goes prom. There goes finding any man who will ever love this face. So that means I won't have 5 kids that I've always wanted. Every kid that looks at me is going to be scared of me. No school is ever going to hire a teacher with scars all over their face like this. Everyone is going to be scared of me. My hopes and dreams that I had built up in my life and my plan for my future is now ruined because of this. Because of one person's choice, my whole future for me. To me, at the time, I thought it was ruined. I couldn't see past what had happened. In a blink of an eye, everything had changed. And as I looked at my face, I just started to cry. And I remember I let the first tear roll down, and my dad absolutely freaked out. He was like, why are you crying right now? You don't need to be crying. It's not that bad. You haven't cried from pain. You haven't cried about anything, and you haven't even complained. And now that you've seen your face, you're crying? He didn't really understand. He didn't understand what I was going through. But, I put on that mask that we as people tend to do, and I sucked it up, and I moved on, and I thought, okay, I don't want to make it worse than it already is. And around 7 that next morning, my mom finally made it to the hospital. She had to spend the night in the airport at Orlando because she had missed the last flight going out the night before. And immediately when my mom got there, she started taking pictures. Most of you don't know my mom is a camera fanatic. Like, I could wake up one morning and she's like, okay, I need you to put on red high heels, a polka dot dress, because we're going to take pictures and it's raining outside. And I'm like, Mom, no, I don't want to take pictures. That's how she is. And at the time, I was like, okay, I'm used to it, pose for the pictures. And then I was thinking, you know what? I don't look very photogenic right now. I don't look very nice and neat and clean without any makeup on, with all these black stitches. And after about 5 or 10 pictures, finally, I was like, Mom, why are you taking pictures of me? And she just stopped, and she looked at me, and she said, we're going to need these pictures a year from now to show how God has healed you. And at that moment, my eyes were opened. I wasn't going to think about what had happened. I was going to think about what was going to happen. I was going to turn this test I was in, and I was going to make it into an amazing testimony. I wasn't going to think about all I had lost the other day. I was going to think about all that I had to gain now. I was no longer going to feel sorry for myself or make up any excuses. Instead of saying, why me, I was going to say, why not me? About 3 days after the accident, when you live in a really small town, word gets around really, really fast. So all these people were texting me and asking me what was wrong. And I'm pretty sure I described my face about 1,000 times to a bunch of different people. And having your face look like that and having to describe it so many times just gets kind of old. So I thought maybe I could put the pictures on Facebook. And at first, my mom didn't really like that idea. And I realize now that she was trying to protect me. She didn't want me to put those pictures up of my bloody face on social media so teenagers could have it and they could make fun of me and see maybe negative things they would say towards me. She just wanted to protect me from all of that so I wouldn't have to deal with that too. And I get that. And finally I asked her, I said, should I put the pictures on Facebook? And she looked at me again and she just said, that's your decision. But it seems to me that a lot of people really love you and that a lot of people look up to you. And I think that's because you're different. So I would think about what a normal 13-year-old girl would do, and I would do the exact opposite. And that day, that's what I did. I put the pictures on Facebook like they were the best selfies I had ever taken. I wanted people to see them, and I wanted people to know that my faith hadn't changed just because my face did. And that I served a God that hadn't changed just because my circumstances had. Because God does not change. He was the same God on April 26th, the day of my car accident, as he was on April 25th, when my biggest worry waking up in the morning was if Jordan Wilson's hair looked better than mine. He was still the same God. There were only 3 weeks left of school after the car accident, and I had my stitches taken out a week later on a Thursday, and I went back to school that Friday. The teacher suggested that I just not come back to school and I take the 2 weeks off and I spend time healing and alone. But my parents talked about it and they thought it would be best if I went because they did not want to give me the impression that what had happened to my face was something I needed to hide. And y'all saw me on the screen on my first day of school. I was really pale. I had my stitches taken out, but my scars, well, they weren't scars yet. My cuts were still kind of open. They were oozing occasionally, and my face was really swollen and puffy, and I was sore. I was really, really sore. My neck was kind of like stuck like this for a while. But, I didn't tell anybody that, and I went to school that Friday, and I made it through fine until Monday. And on Monday in English class, we read a story. And in the story, there's this man who had scientists, I guess, work on his face, do his head, and after they got done working on his face and his head, they bandaged him up all around his head like a mummy. And y'all saw the picture of me with my little kissy face kicking with the whole bandages all over my face. And then it said when they took all the bandages off, that he had a scar on his head and everyone at work made fun of him. And it brought back a lot of bad memories for me, and I raised my hand and I asked the teacher, can I go to the bathroom, please? And I guess she could hear the brokenness in my voice, and she could hear the tears that I was about to cry, and she excused me from the classroom, and she called the guidance counselor. And the guidance counselor then called my mom, so my mom came up to the school. And I was in the bathroom, crying, all upset. And most moms, when they see their daughter crying in the bathroom who had just 1 week prior broke a window with their face, would immediately take them home. Not my mom. No, that's not how it went down. She assured me that if I wanted to go home and I felt like I needed to go home, she would take me. And then she told me, you need to remember that there are a lot of people watching you. They want to see if you're going to walk the walk that you've been talking about all these years. They want to see if you're going to stay strong during this hard time in your life. And then she told me, lunch is in 20 minutes, and if you stay, I'll bring you Subway. I was really, really upset. I was sad. I was mad. All I wanted to do was go home, lay in bed, cocoon myself in a nice fuzzy blanket, and cry my eyes out and forget about everyone and everything. That's all I wanted to do. But I knew my mom had a good point. As Christians, we are supposed to be an example because someone is always watching you. In 1 Corinthians 16:13, it says, It says, be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, and be strong. And I knew that's what I had to do. What my mom said spoke to me, and not just because she bribed me with Subway. And I knew that if I went home, there probably wouldn't be any food, much less Subway, because although my mom is great at giving out wisdom, she's not very good at feeding me. But because I know I am called to be strong and courageous and stand firm in my faith, even when things are bad. No, wait. Especially when things are bad. I stayed that day. I learned that when something bad happens to us, instead of asking, how does this affect me and my life, we need to ask, how can this affect eternity? If we live our lives by the scriptures and we read God's word and we focus on living how God wants us to, we may be the only Bible someone reads someday. Most of us know the Serenity Prayer. And for those of you who don't, it says, "May God grant you the peace to accept the things you cannot, the courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference." Now, the first time I heard this, I was laying in between my parents, and I was 13 and in 8th grade. And yes, I was 13, and I was still occasionally sleeping with my parents. I probably still would to this day if the mood was right and I felt like it. So, don't judge. That's the way I am. Love my parents. But I remember I woke up to them talking and my mom crying and typing on a computer. And I was like, "What's wrong with you?" And she said, "I'm writing your 8th grade ad for your yearbook." And I thought, oh my gosh, it's about to be so sweet. She's going to be like, "You light up our world, you ray of sunshine," all of this. But no, she read it to me and it was this prayer. And I heard it and I was like, no, that's not going to go. I don't get it. Don't put it in my yearbook. I don't understand it. It's weird. I don't like it. And I thought I had made myself clear that day that I did not want it in my yearbook. But a couple months later, lo and behold, we got our yearbooks back, and there it was, laying nice and pretty on my page, like this on the screen. I had, like everybody in the school, asking, what does that mean? What is that supposed to mean? I'm like, I don't know. I told the woman to not put it in there. I didn't want it in there. I don't get it either. And they're like, "I know your parents are kind of overprotective, but I don't get the prayer in the yearbook ad." I'm like, "I know. I'm going to talk to her about it when I get home. It's weird. I know." So I got home, and I was like, "Mom, why did you put that in my yearbook? I told you not to." And then she looked at me, and she just said, "Your father felt like we needed to keep it. He said he knew it was different, but that he couldn't quit thinking that for some reason it was perfect." And that seems really sweet, but at the time I was like super irritated, and I was like, no, that's not okay. Everyone else says like, "We love you to the moon and back. You're a beautiful young lady. We've watched you grown up 13 years, and you're amazing. We know you're going to do great things in high school. Keep up the good work, champ." And mine was this prayer that I didn't understand. None of us understood it. But 1 week later, I had my car accident. And the Serenity Prayer finally made sense. As much as I resented my parents for putting that in my yearbook, my daddy stayed strong and he listened to the Holy Spirit. And because of that, I have a reminder in my yearbook that long before the accident ever happened, God was preparing me for it. And I think sometimes as Christians, we behave the same way towards our lives as I did towards that yearbook ad. We don't understand why God has put something in our life that we don't want there. We don't understand why He's asked us to walk down some road, and then we look over at our neighbor over here, and they're walking down this beautiful road full of flowers, and it looks so much better, and they have all these amazing things, and we get irritated and we're mad because why don't our lives look like theirs? We get this idea that now that we're Christians, life is supposed to be perfect. We've given our life to Christ. We have this one-way ticket to Easy Street. That's how it's supposed to be. That's what society thinks. There's even a popular public figure out there who says, if you pray hard enough and you have enough faith and you believe in God, that He's just going to shower you with blessings that you can't even fathom. He's going to take away all the pain. He's going to live with you. He's going to be with you, and your life is going to be wonderful with blessings from your heart's desires. But it kind of sounds like he's relating God to a genie in a bottle who grants your every wish. In Isaiah 43:2, it even says, let me find it here. It says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you." Now, I read this because I want you to see that this scripture does not say, "If you pass through the waters, I will be with you." It does not say, "If you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned." it says when. God is promising us that we're going to go through tough times. The promise is not that life is going to be easy. The promise isn't that this life is going to give us everything we want now that we're Christians. The promise is that He will be with us. It's during those tough times that God's strength can be shown the most. And now one of my favorite scriptures is 2 Corinthians 9 through 10. And it says, "But He said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, even then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong.'" Blessings won't always come as our heart's desires. Sometimes they're hard to see, and they're even harder to understand. We don't get them. We don't need to put question marks where God has put periods. Laura Story even sings a very popular song called Blessings, and it says, "What if your blessings come through raindrops, and what if your healing comes through tears?" Some of our greatest blessings in life can come from the hardest things we ever go through. They can come from loss and tragedy and betrayal. They can come from all three of those things, and we automatically in life look at those and think those are bad. We need to stay away from those. But you know what? We can take those situations, and with God's help, we can turn them around. Because brokenness can be a blessing, but we have to allow God to work through us and use those situations for good. We have to allow God to use it. A lot of people quote the verse Philippians 4:13. I know all of y'all have heard it. It's oh gosh, I had a brain lapse. What is Philippians 4:13? Hold on, I have to look this one up. "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Sorry, brain lapse. We've all heard that one, but not many of us have heard Philippians 4:12. And that one says, "I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want." You know, Philippians 4:13 is a great verse that gives people hope to lose weight or quit smoking, or the basketball players that are holding a trophy on social media and they're like, "Philippians 4:13, shout out to you, God." You know, it helps them with their everyday life things that they're going through. But when Paul wrote this, he was talking about something that's a lot harder than all of those things combined. And it tells us that in Philippians 4:12. He is talking about learning to be content. Just like before my accident, it was easy for me to follow God's will and to be happy and have joy because everything was going my way. It was still God's way, but it was my way. I had everything I wanted. Everything was perfect. The problem didn't arise until I felt like something was taken away from me that I needed and that I wanted. That's when I got mad, and that's when I resented God, and that is when all the trouble started, and I was irritated and I was mad. Not until something was taken away from me did I have those feelings towards God, and I was not content. People think that I handled the accident so well because I believed that God would heal my face back to the way it was before, but you know, I didn't know what God was going to do with my face. But I knew that I had made peace with that, and that was okay with me because I'm to follow God's will. And whether God wanted to heal me back and make me look like the prettiest girl in high school, or if God wanted me to walk around my whole life, never get married and never teach kids and live in a cardboard box on the side of the road ministering to people with a giant scar across my face, I didn't care which one. Because I had learned to be content with what God wanted for my life. I wasn't going to feel sorry for myself. I just wanted to follow God's will, and I made peace with that. God was going to make my situation good, even if He didn't make me pretty and put my face back together. Now, I want to sum all that up with one of my favorite stories that I've heard in church before. It's about this tightrope walker, and he's going to walk across the Grand Canyon. He's got a crowd on this side, and then he's got a crowd on this side. And he says to this crowd, he's like, do you believe that I can walk across this tightrope and make it to the other side? And the crowd's like, oh my gosh, we believe in you, you can do it. So he walks on over to this side, and he gets here and he's like, do you believe that I can walk up to this side, but this time with a wheelbarrow full of potatoes? And the crowd goes crazy. They're like, oh my gosh, potatoes, you can do it, you can push it. So he pushes the wheelbarrow over here and he makes it to the other side. The crowd goes crazy and he's like, do you believe that I can push this wheelbarrow across to this side, but with somebody in it? And then everybody goes crazy, like, oh my gosh, you can do it. And then he looks around and he's like, do I have any volunteers? And then the crowd gets quiet. You see, the crowd believed in him, but they did not have faith in him and they did not trust him. There is a big difference between believing in someone and trusting in someone. And as Christians, we have to believe in God and trust in God, because you know what? Even the demons believe in God, okay? We have to have a relationship with him and trust in him. If we don't, then we won't be able to use all of our situations for good. We can't allow God to work through us. So if you don't get anything out of me today, and you've completely fallen asleep and you don't get anything, and you're like, oh my gosh, she's almost done, please get this. In order for God to work in your life and through you, you have to not only believe in him, but you have to trust him. You have to trust him no matter what you're going through. If you're bullied, you have to trust him. If you are financially unstable, you still need to trust him. If your family is falling apart, you need to trust him. If you have insecurities, you need to trust him. You have to trust him with any situation he's given you and just make the most out of it. Now, I didn't know how I was going to end it, but he sent me a Facebook message about the service being about family. And most of you think, when you think family, you think of your parents and how much they mean to you and how your parents are the ones who lead you and guide you, but the siblings don't get enough credit. And I have one good brother. He has never, I don't think I've ever had a day when he has never looked at me and told me, Colie, you are beautiful. You are just so beautiful. And on the way to school, he never has failed to ever tell you, I love you, sissy. Or he doesn't call me sissy anymore. I'm Co. I'm sorry. It's not sissy. Sorry if I embarrassed you. He'll say, I love you, Co. He never fails to do that. As family, we have to come together, and siblings, don't be embarrassed of each other, because God has given you that, and that is one of the biggest blessings he will ever bless you with. And I just wanted to thank all of you for allowing me to speak to you today. God bless you all. Thank you for your time.
Amazing, amen? Wow, give her another hand. Yeah, Colie, thank you so much. I wrote down several things that she said that I want to quote. My faith hadn't changed even though my face did. Wow, how many times do we witness people's faith change because their situation changes? I told I was going to give you a word this morning. For some of you that have children in different areas of life, you may have more than one word. But this one word, it changes as children's change, as they grow and mature, as they move from going from preschool throughout the different stages of their life. So for some of you this morning, you may have 2 or 3 words. That's why we as parents must be very focused, very strategic, very committed to the process, because as I hear about the testimony of Colie, I was talking to her mom, Michelle, on the phone, and I said, Michelle, I just want to encourage you, because as you as a parent, as you and your husband are training this young lady in the ways of God, the proof is not during the good times, it's during the bad times. A single word that I can give you this morning is so important because it does several things. Number one, for us as a church, it helps us to stay focused on the mission and on the vision. As new people come into the church and have ideas on what to do in ministry, I've been a part of churches where they have like 40, 50 different ministries, and they did them all fairly decent, but they didn't do any of them great. And so for us as a church, we don't have tons and tons of different ministry departments. We have a very few because we want to do them with exceedingly high purpose and high mission and high success. It's what I encourage you as parents, as you're raising your children. Is it profitable to do all the activities? Because we all only have 24 hours in a day. And there might be times that you need to rally behind this one word for where your family's at, where your children are at. For those of you that have preschool and infants, here's the one word that we try to display in our children's ministry that I would encourage us as parents to do as well, and that's the word embrace. See, when you have infants and you have small children, the number one goal that they need from you and from me is for us to embrace and meet their physical needs. We have women and men who work in the infant nursery department, and that's constantly what they're doing. They're meeting physical needs, whether it be with goldfish crackers, changing a diaper, or just holding them as they go into parent withdrawals. See, when you and I learn to embrace and meet an infant or preschool's physical need, we're laying a foundation of giving them the first impression of what God is like. Scripture says that He's a good Heavenly Father. As they grow and mature, we move them into elementary age. The one word that we focus on towards our elementary children, that I encourage us as parents to focus on, the one word is engage. See, they're at the level of their life where everything's new, they're ready to interact, they're ready to discover. And as those of you in this room who have small children in elementary, to engage their interests. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people come to our church, and the reason why they come to our church is because their kids were excited about coming to church. Why? Because we make it our high priority when it comes to children in K-5 through 5th grade to engage their interest. We put high focus and energy and effort and time to make ministry dynamic on their level. I'll just do a little quick plug. If you haven't signed up to be a part of VBS, you need to be a part of VBS. We're going to engage children and their family. Because when we engage their interest, it causes them to take interest in God. As they move into their middle school years, the number one thing that they need, that we must be committed to focusing on, is the word affirm. Affirm. We need to learn how to affirm their personal journey. Because as they journey through life, these are the years when concrete becomes lucid. When black and white starts to mix and become gray. Where what was once a sure foundation now becomes questionable. It's the time of life where responsibilities start to shift. And confusion often pops up. And it's during these processes of life of learning independence and learning their own faith, learning why they believe what they believe, that we as parents and caregivers and pastors and church leaders are committed to affirm who they are, constantly giving endorsement that who they are is special because they're made in the image of God. Even those kids that give you a hard time in class, or your children who make you want to pull your hair out, to affirm them who they are. This is where we prove relationship, unconditional love. Because anyone can love when the sun is shining. Anyone can love when everything's going great at the house. But when chaos breaks out or devastation enters into the family, this is the true test. Do you love them unconditionally? Now, we as parents, we can easily answer yes to that. But for those of us who are in the church and a kid acts up or does something we don't like, how do we react? That's the test of why you do what you do. And hopefully, and I can speak for many of our children's workers, it's because we believe children are very special. And so we affirm them. And this is where we move into the high school years. Because once we've laid a foundation of learning how to embrace their physical needs, learning how to engage their interest, pointing them towards God and teaching them, and then affirming who they are in Christ, eventually they become high schoolers. And the one word that we constantly must emphasize is the word mobilize. Mobilize. Mobilize their potential. Every kid made in the image of God has potential. It's now that we take the time to send them out. I love the story that Colie gave about her mom. A prime opportunity to retreat, if you will, to focus inward. And mom says, no, there are people watching you. A mom and dad that have mobilized their daughter will support and affirm you and will support what you choose. But as your parent, you're not called to back down. See, by the 9th grade, if we've done our job, then it starts showing up in a big way during the high school years. If we focus on these one words during different stages of life, then when they become high school students, they are mobilized and planted and instilling into the next generation what we've instilled to them. This is where we learn to either let go or when to hold on. It's why we as a church, we give them opportunities to lead. We give them opportunities to be the church. I'll be very honest with you this morning. My prayer for many years as the pastor of this church was this: God, send people to Christ Community Church who have a passion and a desire to grow children and teens, to disciple them. 4 years into this, my prayer has shifted a little bit. And while I still pray for God to send people who have a vision for these words, I'm now praying, God, send me 9-year-olds that have a call of God on their life, that I can give them the church. 4 years ago, I challenged our church with this thought of a 10-year vision. Because myself, as a parent at the time, having a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, in 10 years, they'd be mobilized as a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old. That was 3 years ago. This is more than just one word. This is a calling. This is a calling to step into being focused with the belief that can change how you treat every kid. Not just a belief, but also a rule that will change how you teach every kid. And one word that will change how you lead every kid. For us as Christ Community Church, we take very seriously and we honor very openly our teachers in public schools, our parents, and our staff that is committed to following, because This is a fight worth fighting. I challenge you just like Colie challenged you. You need to remember that there's a lot of people watching you. Will your talk line up with your walk? And will your walk line up with your talk? I have discovered that if we'll focus on this right here, we'll focus on the one word for where you're at and stay the course, that it's a faith that will produce high dividends into the next generation. Let me pray for you.